So Kai, tell me a little bit about yourself as a coach.
Okay, we're doing it. Well, as a coach, I've doing it for 5 years, and over the years, it's been evolving, changing.
Yeah.
Right now, I'm really focusing on emotional work, and at the core of it, it's the inner child healing work.
Okay.
But really, my work, it's the intersection of personal development, emotional, communicational, and my students do the work in their relationships.
Okay.
But I guess it always kind of goes back to the inner work, where even when they work in their relationships, I always frame it as developing a healthy, respecting, accepting relationship starting with yourself.
Yeah.
So there's always that inner piece that meets the outer piece, whether it's emotional, mental, conversational, but I also really frame it so my students do the work with themselves. And don't forget that at the end of the day, the only guarantee that's going to be there when we pass is yourself.
Yeah.
So you really want to have that loving, accepting relationship with yourself. So it kind of starts there.
Everything starts from the inside outward, right?
Inside outwards, yeah.
So what is your current tagline?
Great question. So my current tagline is, I help you rewire your emotional DNA so you can heal anxiety, people-pleasing patterns, and become the first empowered generation in your family. And really, at the core of it, it's helping people go from surviving to thriving.
Awesome, man. So rewiring your emotional DNA, what does that involve?
Yeah, what does that involve? So I'll be completely vulnerable with you. Working with a business coach, and we're kind of rebranding.
Yeah.
So she's been doing a lot of research, looking at the marketing, the packaging.
Yeah.
So emotional DNA, it's a concept that's been around.
Yeah.
I guess it's kind of more like hidden. Emotional DNA, it's not real like genetic DNA,
Right.
like microscope, telescope, you can see it. Whereas emotional DNA, it's like the invisible inheritance
Okay.
that we got, like our emotional reactions, what triggers us, how we express our feelings. So some of it is like passed down. Like if you have anxious parents, very likely that was passed down to you. But also the patterns that gets transmitted early in childhood. So rewiring, I help my students do so at a mental level.
Okay.
So a lot of the techniques, it's like, CBT, whereas like challenging your thoughts, having new thoughts, positive thoughts, but also understanding when our brain isn't thinking, like it isn't thinking, how do you say it, clearly or accurately.
Yeah.
We can focus on the negatives, we can generalize, we can focus on the negatives, or we mind read. So there's the mental level of work, and then also the emotional level, which is kind of reconnecting with your body,
Yeah.
nervous system, emotional body, and being familiar and being skillful at how we approach, how we navigate our emotions and our nervous system. And then the other lens is the inner child work, which it kind of operates like mental, emotional, nervous system. And it just gives you this framing that we're like multidimensional. We all have these different parts inside of us, and we have some younger parts that shows up in present day, whether or not we're aware of it. And really that younger part, they kind of need us to kind of step up, like stand up for them, and almost like become the parents they needed back then, today. So it's pretty beautiful work, because we are these younger parts. So when we do this work, we're helping that part feel loved and safe, encouraged, praised, almost like giving that part everything it didn't get from parents, teachers, but also at the same time, like we're receiving it as that younger part, but we're also becoming that guardian, that parent figure that we never got. So it's just kind of like, it's really trippy, because like our present day person is like the vehicle that bridges the gap as we're kind of stepping into the future, and we're kind of like reclaiming and reconnecting our past. So it's also like this trippy kind of like time trippy work as well. Yeah.
Yeah, some layers of inception coming through of present self, past self, future self, all coming together to support you as a person.
Yeah, some Inception-like stuff.
Yeah. If someone hasn't heard of inner child work before, what are some of the most basic steps?
That's a good question. I guess the bigger umbrella is like internal family systems, IFS, and I think inner child's like a sub-branch of it. So if you never heard of inner child, like without the jargon or the concept, the whole idea is that we're all once children. Every single human, like I would be shocked. You're like an alien. So someone tell me that you are not a child, right?
Right.
So the whole premise is that we go through developmental stages, like baby, toddler, preschool, grade school, adolescence, that can span all the way to 20s, like mid-20s. And each stage, we had certain needs that usually our caretaker, they're the only one that could provide it for us. And also each stage, we're like developing like ourselves, who am I? Very important things about myself, but also we're evolving through relationships. So inner child work is when at any of these stages, some of us it's all these stages, needs weren't met, or there could have been like, traumatic things that happened. And it's almost like our development got frozen. We didn't go past it. So we kind of carry those younger parts. And for us to become kind of whole, we're gonna need to connect with those younger parts. And we're gonna need to, in some ways, like learn what we didn't learn. And to be able to help those younger parts like process like any maybe stuck emotions that didn't make sense at the time, right? They didn't have the guidance. And sadly, a lot of times, like not only do we not get our needs met, but it was the people that we depended on to take care of us, protect us, like show us like we're worthy, they hurt us, whether it was intentional or not. And as a child, we're so sensitive. So even like, I don't know, like if your dad wasn't paying attention to you or wasn't available with his attention, with his presence, that can become a little wound, a little hurt spot. Or if mom, like out of her frustration, like said things like, oh, you're making mom upset or angry, like stop doing this. Like we really take that to heart. Yeah. And that's almost like our early programming. Then we become adults with these kind of like wounded perspectives, right? And maybe not knowing who I am, or we kind of end up maybe carrying a lot of anxiety or like toxic shame. So there's different signs to know if you have a wounded child. But one like kind of like quick sign is like if you looked at all pictures of your younger self, who do you see and how do you feel? Like do you feel a cringe? Do you feel a bit of rejection, a shame, right? Like you want to be able to look at your younger self and just like feel like proud. Yeah. Like I see this younger self, amazing. What amazing guy, amazing boy. So that's kind of some basic foundations of this work.
I heard a stand-up comedian one time, of course, make a joke. He's a comedian, but he's like, I have anxiety because somebody yelled at me when they should have hugged me when I was 4. And it's like, on some level, that's just the truth of it. Like, we all were brought up in different ways, and regardless of our parents, some are better, some are worse, we'll never know which is which. But people fall short, period. And it's an opportunity to really take ownership and take accountability of what happened wasn't my fault, it wasn't my responsibility, but here I am now, and it's my responsibility to heal and move forward.
Yes, right? It's not that like, it's not a matter of fact that like I have to do this now, but it's like, I get to do this and no one else can do this for me. Yeah. Right? So yeah, like, thank you for sharing that part. Because right, a lot of people, they begin to unpack and then they can kind of get stuck in a loop of like maybe shaming, blaming others, shaming, blaming themselves. So really it's like, it's both. It's like acknowledging what happened, seeing it clearly, objectively, and also it's like asking yourself, and now what? Right? And now what? And how can I move forward? Like how can I, really heal and let this be in the past? Because sometimes people rush it. They think that, it was in the past, don't worry about it, I'm over it. But then it shows up and they're not aware. Yeah. And then they might not they don't have that awareness to even take that responsibility and accountability. Yeah. That wasn't maybe just what you said or did, even though that was maybe triggering, but what it brought up inside of me, that was kind of personal. That was very personal, that I need to take ownership for.
Yeah. So toxic shame, this was such a life-changing concept that you introduced me to. Can you tell people what that means?
Yeah, toxic shame. I learned this concept. His name's John Bradshaw. He's a therapist who passed on. And he has like a book on healing the shame that binds you. I learned inner child work from him. And he calls toxic shame the master emotion. Like those toxic shame itself, it's this deep belief. It was once a feeling, but then becomes like a belief and identity that I'm bad. I'm bad to the core. Like I'm defected, I'm gross, I'm messed up, I'm broken, right? It's almost like the worst place you can be in is in the pit of toxic shame, where it's a very isolating, right? Like literally it's like you're in exile. There's something about you that's so bad that if someone else finds out, they'll be like, oh my God, right? Everyone else finds out and then like you're gone, you're rejected.
Yeah.
So like John Bradshaw calls it the master emotion, because our natural instinctive feelings can become shame bound. So right, a lot of men, what becomes shame bound is feelings of sadness, like sensitivity, crying. So literally like sad feelings that gets shame bound. And same as our identity, it gets shame locked. That I think at the core of a lot of even like addictions or compulsions, at the core of a lot of like, I'm not blank enough, I really believe it is toxic shame.
Yeah.
And it's one of the most heaviest energies to be in. So I think most people carry it, but then we have more superficial ways of like neglecting it, denying it, but it always ends up coming up. Whether it comes out in like self-sabotage or really believe, right? For us to feel that badness, it comes out in compulsions and addictions, in secrets.
Yeah.
But here's like the paradox, right? Like to heal toxic shame, right? It's to accept and love all parts of you,
Yeah.
that part who holds that shame. And whether like you need a being, whether it's like a God figure that you almost like confess to, right? They still love you, accept you for what you've done or whatever it is, or a human. But make sure this human is like accepting. They're not shame-based themselves. Because if you share with them like a shamey secret, and then they're like, oh my God, it's gross, it's terrible, how could you? That just creates the more shame.
Yeah.
So usually, whether it's support, and that's why I think AA works so well. Because really it's just like safe space, and you really surrender. You really return to your humility, which is like being imperfect, flawed. And then you have people that not only holds your secret, but they understand.
Yeah.
And you're still accepted and loved despite this badness.
Yeah, just having someone that can hold space for the depth of you, right? And I think that's super important to learn to create inside of yourself. For me as a person, I've been doing personal development work for years. And I had been aware of inner child work. I hadn't been aware of toxic shame. And inner child work is something that I had been actively going, oh, I'll get to that later. I know that it could probably help, but whatever, we'll in the future, right? And there I was, Vietnam at Hoi An Wellness Week, and all of a sudden there was an inner child healing session.
Yeah.
And I was faced with some things, let me tell you. He made me cry.
Made him cry.
Yep.
Wow. Thank you for crying.
While also introducing me to this toxic shame. And it was a great concept. And in my own language, I had a similar but different idea. And even where I'm still at now is learning to hold space for the parts of myself that I had tried to change.
Yeah.
It's really getting to that depth and understanding that I am a whole person. And the parts of myself that I am ashamed of are the parts that make me whole.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, that's beautiful. And really, I really see like, like shame gets like passed in families where there could have been like good and wrong, like this good boy, bad boy, or who you were as a full being wasn't maybe always culturally accepted or within your family system.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be like that, boys don't do that, girls don't do that. So really it's like at a young age, like multiple times throughout our younger years, we learn that, like this is bad or I shouldn't do that, I'm bad. Because right, like even if your parents were like pretty aware, like if we weren't fully accepted, we're like being younger, we're like we're self-centered. Like everything comes back to me. So even when like, we weren't, acknowledged or praised or noticed, weren't fully accepted, like the internal story is that like, I'm bad.
Yeah.
Like there's something must be wrong about me, right? Even younger, right? There must be something bad about me. Like I'm the reason why, like mom and dad are fighting, unhappy. Like deep down inside, right? Our younger child, they could have made up the story that like, I'm bad.
Yeah.
Right? And then a lot of people like they go their whole lives trying to prove their goodness. But then at the same time, right, they neglect or abuse themselves.
Yeah.
Right? They go on this whole thing of being good, but then they really never come fully home, like full circle.
Yeah.
Right?
Man, that's so this is a quote that I don't know who said, and this is an idea that was introduced to me in a podcast a while ago, but as somebody who dealt with that, who felt the need to do right and do good by the world. The persona is incapable of receiving love. It can only receive praise. So if you have a person who's full of toxic shame, who feels that they are a bad person, this was myself, I'm speaking from the heart here, of you feel not good, so then you go out and you do as much good as possible in this world. You, since there is a disconnect there, that is a persona. You feel that it is not the authentic version of you doing good in the world. Then when people see you do good in the world, they praise that persona, but that persona is incapable of receiving love. It can only receive praise. So people say, you're doing such great things, you're doing so great, you're such a good person. You see that, you hear that, and it makes you feel like you are a bad person even more, because there's such a disconnect and this massive imposter syndrome of they don't see how bad of a person I am. I'm manipulating the whole world into thinking I am a good person. Toxic shame is a thing, man.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. Because really, I forgot to mention, toxic shame is not just a master emotion. It's like a wound to our soul.
Yeah.
Right? And then what happens when we're younger too, like what you described, we split. Like we split because who we really are, our true feelings, our needs, our interests, it's not acceptable.
Yeah.
So we almost like discard, abandon, reject that authentic core.
Yeah.
And then like you said, right, we put on this persona, this false self. And really that's a splitting. There's like who we really are and this fake persona that we know this is what gets us attention. But a lot of people, right, we forget that this is not who we are. But then at a young age, we start playing this persona, right? This false self.
Yeah.
And there'll always be that imposter syndrome. There'll always be like this split inside when we don't like realize that this is not who we really are, right? And like we need to return to or rediscover or reclaim maybe that more true part. But also wait, the false self is also a part of you too.
Right.
So it's also not to villainize that. I think it's just like a lot of it's kind of like going from villainizing these bad parts that needs to be fixed to more of this accepting that they all served a purpose.
Yeah.
And really acknowledging that this got me here.
Yeah.
But also for me to go further, like this can't go further. So sometimes it's kind of become this beautiful, like acknowledging, mourning process, even like a thankful, grateful process, but also empowering. That like you're not telling it from like a victim lens. That like my parents did that to me. That's why I was like this for 5 years, 10 years. But now I overcame it. I fixed myself. I overcame it now. I'm not like that anymore.
Yeah.
Right? That bad part's done, and I'm just good part now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also not like that.
No, man. One of the Man, a realization that I had years into therapy that really messed me up is that I'm always going to feel like me. And that was, I just thought that eventually if I kept doing the work and making changes, I would feel different.
Wow.
And in some ways you do, right? Because you have different reactions and different coping mechanisms, and you get to let go of the weight that you've carried inside. But at the end of the day, you're always going to feel like you, man. So you better get used to that.
I love that. Yeah. That reminds me of this other beautiful quote. Carl Rogers, like therapist, psychologist Carl Rogers, not like the TV show Carl Rogers, but he said, I think it says, like, the curious paradox is that when I can fully accept myself just as I am, then I can change.
Yeah.
Which is like, what do you mean? Wait, what? Wait, what? Yeah. But it's true though, because a lot of people, they do it backward. It's like, I don't accept myself until I change.
Yeah.
Right? But if it starts there, right? If it starts with that toxic shame, non-acceptance, you might change, but it might not be sustainable. Or it's like, is this a change that's something that you deeply need? Because even like working out, a lot of people, it's like, they put conditions to loving myself, or the conditions of being lovable once I lose this weight.
Yeah.
Right? Once I shed these 30 pounds, once I get the six pack, or, you know, physical adjustments, then I'm acceptable.
Yeah.
But it's like never ending, right? Or they lose that weight, but then the toxic shame is still there.
Yeah.
Then they give up that diet, whatever, right?
Man, yeah, like as a person who tried everything to find self-love, like self-acceptance comes from one thing, and that's learning to accept yourself.
Yeah.
Which sounds so, of course, right? Where else would it come from? But it was like, I achieved the things at work. I achieved the things in the gym. I achieved the things on the track running. I achieved, like, if it came from a book, I would have read it. If it came from a podcast, I would have found it. If it came from an accomplishment, I would have had it.
Right.
And it was just being faced with, okay, so does feeling good enough come from doing something, or does feeling good enough come from learning to feel good enough?
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that.
So can you love yourself and still repeat the same toxic patterns?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, I don't have a clear-cut answer. I want to say, like, yes, because I think love, it's like an ongoing practice, and it's like a choice. So, like, as we're growing, as we're moving forward, as we're healing, we're gonna keep discovering patterns. We're gonna maybe repeat certain things that we know, like, this is not good for me, my health, it's not good for my future, my relationships. And I think part of this, like, shame releasing work, accepting work, love work, is as you go forward, it's really how you respond as these are happening, and maintaining your awareness and your loving choice throughout the whole process. Because right, if you were able to be fully aware and constantly always choose love, you wouldn't have done that maybe toxic pattern. But even with that slip, and like my students slip a lot, right? Whether they like find themselves again in a similar relationship with a different guy or whatever, or they have, you know, maybe addictive patterns like smoking or drinking, and they find themselves slipping back, right? They might be going through some tough life stuff, and then like in that moment, they're like, oh, this is too unbearable or whatever, like I'm gonna do it. So it's important, right? Like, as you're maybe doing the thing that's maybe very shamey, can you still like see yourself with love, or do you go into shaming mode? So right, like choosing that love, practicing that loving acceptance through it, and then afterwards, like, can you still continue to give yourself that love acceptance? And also, like, can you like bring someone in? Like bring someone in, like during the shame, I call it, like, you know, the shame spiral, right? Or afterwards, almost like be able to reveal. So I really believe it's like, because I think a lot of times that the shame wants you to believe that you're forever bad. And it wants you to believe that like all your hard work in that one moment of you going back to that toxic pattern, you just erased every good thing that you've done. and now you're back at zero, and this is why you whatever, right? Like the toxic shame will like kind of tell you these things. So I really believe, yes, like the process, the journey of love is to give yourself that love and acceptance as you're going through this. But here's where the other part has to come in, the accountability part, and also like community. Because yes, you can love yourself, accept yourself as you're going through it, but if it's not met once you go through this with maybe that accountability or with that community support, you might find yourself just repeatedly going through it again, maybe with less shame and more acceptance and love, but then you don't have that future push, the support to overcome it or to go through it. So you can really like understand and say bye to these repeating patterns.
Yeah, for me as a person, when I'm having these moments of like a toxic cycle, two questions come up. That's, can I love this version of myself too? So it's a space of allowing, of if you still need this behavior, that's okay. Can you love yourself while you do this?
Yeah.
And the second question is, what do you still need to learn from this? Because if you felt entirely done from it, if you felt completely detached, you wouldn't have this behavior anymore. What do you still hope to gain from this? So it's a real opportunity. It's tricky because at what point in time do you need to say, all right, enough is enough, figure it the fuck out, right? But when push comes to shove, there's a time and a space to learn to hold that space.
Yeah.
So learn to hold that space. Can I love this version of me too? What do I still need to learn? Allow yourself to be in that space without the shame, without the guilt. Just be there, be present with yourself, learn. And then like you're saying, when you move forward, what do you need to do? Whether support from the outside, support from the inside, what action do you need to take to help make sure that you don't need to go back there, right?
Yeah, well said, well put. Because really it's like, when we find ourselves in these like repetitive cycles, even though we're aware it's not good for us, it's like what you said, right? It's like, okay, what can I learn from this? Yeah. But also it's like, sometimes with the toxic shame, it's like a core part of us, we learn it's bad, but even like core part of us, like our needs, our desires, that like quite often whatever we're doing out of shame, like a shameful behavior or addiction, like we're trying to almost like give ourselves something that we need. However, like it's for us to discover like what is actually like a healthier manifestation of what I might be like giving myself in those shaming moments that I can actually get from in a healthy way. Like a lot of people, you know, for instance, they have like drinking or gambling addictions or like sex addictions. Quite often, like, you know, with the sex addiction piece, right? Like their sexuality or their own self-image got wounded, and they're really unable to maybe like see that I can have enjoyable sex, or I can like have this in real life with a deep relationship, and I don't need to resort to like, you know, whether it's masturbation or like porn or cam use. Nothing wrong with that, but really it's like, what is underneath it all? Like, is it out of shame, out of like, you know, I don't deserve this, I can't get this is bad? When it's not bad. Like sex is not bad, you know, it's deep connection. So also being able to decipher like, how is this maybe helping me get a need that I haven't got? And is what I want out of this like bad? Likely it usually isn't bad. Because on the other side, right, there's healthy shame. And healthy shame is what keeps us not overindulging, right? Overindulging in things, right? A natural feeling of healthy shame should come online. Like if you're at at a family dinner, right? And you know, there's like 50 people, and there's limited food, and you catch yourself like, you know, wanting to take like another big scoop of whatever. Like there should be some feelings of healthy shame that we have limits. So it's like the safeguard of like knowing our limits and not overdoing it or you know, overindulging.
Everything is about balance, man. So what's the first real step someone should take to stop passing down generational trauma?
Yeah, the first step, oof. I think it's the awareness piece. Just being aware how like our past has influences in our present, and being aware of these patterns, and also, you know, it's hard, right? Because so much of it's like a nervous system, like program, like repetitive cycles. But yeah, it has to start with awareness, like being aware, like how I'm thinking, feeling, behaving, speaking, and being aware of the impact that might have on others. Because right, it's like we're not aware of our patterns, we're not aware of our of these past stuff coming present, and we're not aware of like how other people are being impacted or feedback. It's really hard for us to start changing.
So once somebody gains the awareness that, hey, I've got generational trauma, I've had impacts from other people, what step do they need to take with the awareness?
Yeah. So this is like part of the whole package, right? It's that it's both like the self, like accountability, and also acceptance. So acceptance, like when I say acceptance, I mean like noticing what's happening. Like accepting what I mean is like meeting reality that I have been behaving this way. This does, from the past, this influenced my present day. So really seeing it clearly, like coming to terms that this is what's happening, right? And for the accountability piece to come on, you have to be like really honest with yourself. Right? Like you have to like not, and what I think that's so hard is so much of us are soaked in like shame, overwhelm, that when we start to reflect honestly, it could easily become shaming, blaming, and judging yourself. So, right, so being aware that like, okay, how can I reflect, be honest with myself, right? And letting other people give me feedback, and also seeing the feedback, what part is true. And it has to start with that self-honesty. And then from there, right, the accountability is that my choices has results.
Right.
My behavior, my words has results. Where do I want to go? Like, where do I want to go? And is what I'm doing now getting me there? If not, what else can I be doing that might get me closer to there? So it has to be that honesty, meeting with acceptance, and then meeting with that accountability to move forward.
So why do you think so many people stay stuck in the awareness and never move to healing?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think, you know, it's scary to do this work. There's this book called Inner Work. I think it's something like Invitation to True Freedom, Lasting Happiness or something, by Matt and Ash. And they have this amazing diagram where it's like broken up into 3 parts. One, the bottom part is like themes of suffering, themes of wounding. So there's like themes of like rejection, judgment, pride. And then there's themes of healing, like self-empowerment. So the very bottom, it's like themes of suffering. And then it's victim abuser mentality. For you to start healing, it's self-empowered. And you have to start with being honest with yourself. That's the leap into healing. And then the very first theme of healing is accountability. So I think a lot of people maybe don't start or are scared to start because it's kind of painful. It's painful and freeing. It's painful to start reflecting, like, what happened? What am I doing here? Like, where do I want to go? Like, what has life been like these past couple of years? Because it is painful to like sit with and to notice. But it's also very freeing because, right, for you to go from victim, self-abusing to healing, empowerment, it's freeing because now it's like what we said earlier. What happened in the past? I wasn't responsible for it, right? I was an innocent child. I carry those wounds now. I carry this inheritance now. So what now? But for us to step into that power, we have to become responsible. Right? With great power comes responsibility. And I think a lot of us here, it's scary to take on that power and responsibility And sometimes it's easier, even though it's painful, for us to be stuck in the familiarity, even though it's, self-victimizing, self-abusing. At least it's like, it's familiar, and I don't maybe have to step into that responsibility where I have no one else to blame. But it's not a blame thing, right? But I think that's where people get scared, is if I take full responsibility, I fully bear the outcome. And there's no one else I will blame or point fingers to. It's just me. But I think on the other side, it's so empowering to realize that you have this power. You always did.
Yeah.
And you get to fully celebrate yourself, whatever happens. But you don't have to do this alone, right? You can celebrate, you can do this work with others, coach, mentors, therapist, in a community. So like I think that's really, we're stepping away from this notion that like I'm self-made.
Yeah.
Like, no, we're not. Like, right? Like, even like when we eat food, like, right? We need food to survive. How did that food get brought into the store, the table? We depend on so many other people, so many other factors. So I think it's also this like stepping into true, genuine connection. That all of these steps is us releasing and healing toxic shame.
Yeah.
Right?
It's really about taking that radical accountability. You're not responsible for everything that happened, but you're responsible for where your life is now. You've got to take ownership of that. My opinion is a lot of people get stuck because they aren't willing to acknowledge the role that they have played in their own suffering. And it's time to be faced with that. In that victim self-abusing mindset, you have the opportunity to outsource everything. Everything that happened isn't my fault. Everything that happened is because of other people. Everything that happened is because of this. Making that switch from the awareness into healing is going, there are things that happened that were not my fault, and there are things that happened that are my fault, and I have to take ownership of all of it if I want to make real change.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And even like our history, our story, because a lot of us here, right? We feel maybe ashamed about parts of our story, but for us to be, maybe fully alive or fully accepting, it's like every part of your story you'll have to face, you'll have to honor, acknowledge, because if you truly are happy, if you truly become a happy, accepting person, then you have to truly accept and acknowledge all the events that got you here.
Yeah.
They all got us here. But right, some things that, we can learn from it, we don't have to keep repeating it, but it's for us to really accept and witness and own our whole story, all the parts, not hiding or sugarcoating any parts, but really see that I had to go through all of it to bring me here. Absolutely,
man. The story doesn't make sense as we're living through it, but it makes complete sense when we look back, right?
I love that.
Yeah. So how do you show love to your inner child after you have disappointed them?
Oh, yeah. It's like any sort of repairment in relationships. And one way that you can approach inner child work is almost like you are trying your best to be a good parent to your child. So, right, like whatever that disappointment was, whether it's like, I don't know, maybe you said yes to something that you knew no, or you're working too hard, right? You're not really making the time for yourself, maybe to like enjoy, play. Also, like, so any repair, it's like, I think this is not something that maybe we saw from our parents because they maybe tried to be perfect, or they were just shameless. Apologize, right? Like kind of like be aware what happened. And you can literally like talk to that part, be like, hey, I'm sorry that I showed up that way. Or I'm sorry I did that, right? I didn't know I might have disappointed us. And you can really have this dialogue with them. It's like, how can I make up to you, right? Like, what can we do differently next time? So, right, like having this repair conversation and then, right, making sure how you show up the next time, right? It literally, like any sort of good relationship, there's a repair, right? Acknowledging, validating their hurt, their anger, right? Working together, collaborating. But then it's like, don't make these words empty. So the next opportunity, what do? Do you show up for yourself, right? Do you be honest with what you need, right? Do you stand up for yourself? So it's like literally like that part, they need you to show up for them. They don't need you to be perfect, right? But I think that's what a lot of parents try to be. Like in trying to be perfect, they realize that they're not.
Yeah.
They make mistakes, but then that triggers so much shame. And then, right, they either like blame it on us, they blame themselves, but they never like take that full ownership that I'm human. Like I'm gonna like mess up.
Yeah.
And part of that is recognizing it and apologizing and then moving forward. It's the same with us. When we disappoint ourselves, go through the same things that we needed to see our parents. Like we knew, like, you know, as a child. Well, here's the confusing part. Like as a child, we almost like survival, we needed to see our parents as all knowing.
Yeah.
Right? But also, right, that the human side or the emotional side is for our parents too, when they do mess up, to own that flawedness.
Yeah.
And to make that repair. So same approach for ourselves. Repair, right? Collaborate, and then be accountable and move forward.
It all comes back to building that relationship with the self, right? Mm-hmm. And that apology means nothing without a change in behavior. Whether that's in a relationship with our romantic partner, with our friendship, with our parents, and of course, here in ourselves. Mm. You can say sorry all day, but if you keep doing the same thing, it doesn't matter. Take ownership. Acknowledge what you've done, but change the behavior. Period. So how do you break a generational cycle without cutting off your whole family?
Oh, that's a great question. Yeah, I think that's what, I think that could be something that stops people from doing this work, because because when we do this work, we're inevitably gonna change.
Yeah.
And like, that's gonna inevitably shake the boat, like rock the foundation of family. So like, there's no guarantee, because sometimes, right, like what ends up happening is you're changing, right? What you are willing to accept and not accept, right? You're being more clear. So that there's no guaranteed answer, but I would say, as you're doing this healing work, right, we're also growing our acceptance, growing our ability to know where I end, where my parents, where my family begins. And it's going to be unique to different family setups and cultures, but I think like this is like a big movement that a lot of people are going through today, like especially like a lot of people maybe in my shoes, where it's like they feel squeezed because they are not necessarily born where our parents are born. So it's like I have a very Western kind of mind and perspective. My parents are more traditional Chinese. So sometimes it feels like they're so against each other, like my individuality, my need for freedom, and my parents is more like collectivist thinking. So I think for you, it's to recognize like that, maybe that happy zone where I can still kind of be myself, show up as myself in my family, while it's always going to be this period of time of adjusting, right? Where my parents acknowledge or accept me for who I am. But also, as you're doing this work, you're going to recognize that like this healing work is never just for yourself. Especially if you're going to be in a relationship with family, right? We affect each other. So as you're doing this work, a lot of it comes with boundaries. So you're also going to be recognizing how you might have been treated or spoken to, or what you've been tolerating before, that like, no, like I don't tolerate this anymore. But there's always going to be this balance. Like what I mean is like, you begin to learn to see your parents for who they were, who they are today, and that is practicing your tolerance, practicing your acceptance, but also on the other side, like, right, setting boundaries and limits, like kind of like confronting them about certain things that you can't just tolerate, whether it's like, I don't know, them raising their voice or whether them showing up unannounced, like whatever that is. But you really get to decide, like, what can I practice accepting? Don't take it personal. And what can I not really tolerate? And we're going to have some conversations in order for us to have an ongoing relationship.
Yeah.
But sometimes, to be fair, you could do all the work and your parents or whoever, your brother, your sister, aren't willing to meet you part way. And then for the time being, you're going to have to reassess the relationship. And sometimes that might be like no contact or very limited contact.
Yeah. The issue with that is that you can only take ownership for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to changing dynamics, you can't decide how the other person is going to respond, period. All you can do is communicate with them, and you don't get to understand it for them. And if it's a person who has habitually minimized or victimized or taken advantage of you, they probably will react poorly to you changing the structure of that relationship.
Mm-hmm.
You don't get to decide what that looks like, but you do have to decide that you're worth making those changes.
Yeah, right. And it's kind of like when we go through this work and we're like, maybe setting boundaries or limits or having honest conversations, we actually like, in some ways, give the power, responsibility back to this other person.
Yeah.
And they have the chance now to maybe like acknowledge their patterns, maybe also to do the healing work themselves. Because in some ways, like when we stay stuck in these maybe more toxic relationship dynamics, we're not helping ourselves. We're not helping the other person. So sometimes the best thing we could do is to break these cycles. Yeah. And sometimes, sadly, the best teacher for someone is sometimes losing people.
Yeah.
Like that is the most painful thing. And that can be sometimes the greatest teacher. That like this person gave me that feedback, this other person gave me the same feedback, so does this person, right? So eventually maybe they learn the lesson that maybe, there's something that's happening inside of me, or I have part to play in these challenges.
So what's one belief that was passed down generationally that you had to break to grow?
So many. Let me think. One belief that got passed down. I think, if we just continue with the toxic shame, I think, from toxic shame, so many beliefs comes out of that. And I think one of them is, like I'm like a burden, right? Like as you do this work, you really get to like go deeper and deeper. But for me, I was like always very apologetic, right? Always like overly worrying about other people while like neglecting myself. And I always like had this like deep down belief that like I'm a burden, like I'm a burden. And I mean, it still shows up sometimes, right? Like even like coming here, like I was like running late and I was just like, a little bit like get into a little bit of a spiral. Like, oh my God, I feel so bad for Sean. I hope he doesn't like, like thinking like, yeah, whatever, all these like spirals. But the belief that like, I'm not a burden.
Yeah.
I don't burden people and I can show up as I am.
Yeah.
And like, not just like when I'm doing my best,
Yeah.
like even when I'm like low, right? I'm not a burden and I have good friends, good family members that like, if anything, that's the time when they want like to know. Like not just when I'm happy and good, but even like when I'm like in a dark place or something, like I'm still not a burden. And there are people that wants to be there with me. They want to see that, they want to see and know that part too. Yeah.
For the record, as soon as Kai walked in, I started yelling at him, "I can't believe you're late right now."
You shamed me even more.
Absolutely. No, and it's the reality of the situation was he walked in, "Oh man, I'm so sorry." Bro, it's all good. Let's just like grab a soda water. Let's go upstairs.
Right?
We typically think that people's reactions are going to be way worse than they actually are. What goes on in our mind is always worse than what's going on in reality.
Yeah, totally, right? Because like I said before, right? We have so much past stuff
Yeah.
that like even like I think one byproduct of like complex PTSD or just a difficult childhood is like we have poor childhood memories,
Yeah.
but it lives in our emotional body,
Yeah.
like in our nervous system or in consciousness. So quite often, right, we're not aware. We like project whatever happened in the past into our present day, right? And really like that child believes that, oh my God, like this is what happens when I'm late. The other person gets very mad. Our relationship is gonna end.
Yeah.
But we also need, this is really where that accountability comes in. Because a lot of people, they don't put themselves in these situations so they can experience a positive outcome.
Yeah.
Whether they like completely isolate, right? So we need to create new emotional memories, but also like attract and be with great people. So right, like I was able to let that go sooner. Where when as soon as like you're like, oh, don't worry about it, Kai, and we came up, like I let that go.
Yeah.
But I also like right, like created that new memory that okay, like 15, 20 minutes late, friend understands, doesn't like, dig it deeper. But also like, I know next time I'm not gonna do this again.
Right.
Right? But I created this new positive memory now that I felt good. I felt relieved. But also I felt like we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna learn from it. So I guess I also like remembered what it's like to be a flawed human.
Yeah. And part of that is growth in and of itself, right? Like a past version of you could have still shown up here and I would have said, hey man, it's all good, it's no problem. And you could continue in that spiral for another hour or two, just like, oh, they're mad at me. I'm looking for signs that they're mad at me.
Yeah, or like I overcompensate.
Yeah.
Right? I'd be even. I'm not pretty good to you, but I have to be extra nice to Sean now. It comes from a place of shame.
Yeah.
Like I would rather be at the place of like I choose to be kind and generous, care about my friends, and act from there.
Yeah.
Rather than from a place of like I'm a burden or like they don't really want to be with me. I got to do this to be loved or to keep them.
Yeah. What would you say to a person who thinks this is just the way I am now?
Oh, yeah. Oh, for me, that's so sad and heartbreaking. Because, right, like that's the power of like belief and like our word spells. Like a funny example, like, that comes up a lot in my lives, like TikTok lives I do, is when someone kind of says something different, but same. It's like, I'm just an angry person. I'm just a depressed person, right? It's like, no, like those are fleeting emotions that you made into a life sentence. So I would say, oh man, it's so hard, right? Like when someone's in that, right? Like the best way, especially if there's someone that in your life, it's like, I know you really want them to break out of this, the truth, and that's not the truth. But really, it's like they need to arrive at the idea for change themselves. And the best thing you do is like acknowledge, accept, and validate. Always like drop little seeds of encouragement or feedback or guides. But really, it's to really acknowledge and accept them that they're kind of in this like pit. They don't see a way out. And how can I still accept them, acknowledge them for being in this pit while still like almost encouraging them that like, hey, like I hate seeing you like this. Like, right? Like you should try that, do that, come with me. But I don't know. Like, I think it's just like there's no good answer. I think the best answer would be for you to like, because I know we all go through different walks of life, but I really believe a lot of us, we've probably maybe been in those holes where we feel like helpless, hopeless, or it feels like, this is for good, that there's no change.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what one could tell them, but just really like acknowledging, accepting without judging and still like actively encouraging. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the old adage, you can lead a horse, but you can't make it drink, right? And you can't force someone to be more self-aware or to take more accountability than they're ready to do. All you can do is plant some seeds, and it's up to them to decide when they'll become fertile soil for those seeds to grow.
Yeah. Like there's this like during the pandemic, I did this like conscious parenting kind of like free thing through Mind Valley. And there's this one guy he was a dad, and he's all about, I forget what his whole thing was, like, I forget what the whole video was about, but he was kind of trying to get his like teenage son to like drink more smoothies, be healthier, happier. So he's done the approach, like telling his son, like, you should drink more smoothies, it's good for you, but it doesn't work because no one likes being told what to do unless it's their own idea. So he like very strategically started drinking these smoothies himself. Like every morning he would drink the smoothie, and he'll always make a bit more, enough for his son, if his son asks. So literally, of course, he kind of played into it. Like he'll like really like make sure his son sees him in the morning drinking the smoothie. Like really like, oh, this is good, right?
This smoothie.
This is so good. And he kept doing it for like weeks, until one day his son's like, Dad, what are you drinking there? But he'd be very, play with it. He's like, oh, this is a really good smoothie. Like, it's so good. It's so fresh. Like, I've been feeling so energized from it, right? Yeah. But being honest too, but kind of packaging it in a way that his son will want. Yeah. And then sure enough, he's like, Dad, like, can I try some? He's like, oh, actually, yeah, I have a little bit left. Here you go. So it's kind of like that, where it's like you meet them where they are, but you're still doing it yourself. Yeah. And you're like encouraging them from a place of love. Yeah. And then whenever they're ready, but maybe they'll never be. Yeah. And can I still accept and love this person if they never do this? Yeah. But if you can't, then maybe it's time that you let them go. Right. Right. Or to question your intentions. It's like, yeah. Because sometimes like we can love someone, accept someone, and they can be stuck. Yeah. They can be hurting. And we can just, like do our work, encourage them, acknowledge them, but really like let that go. Like know where that line is. Yeah.
If you're loving someone with the expectation that they're going to change, your relationship with them is entirely unfair to the both of you, because you're loving a version of them that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
They do not owe it to you to become that person, period.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Right? And like ideally, right, I think for both of us, we invest in ourselves, we realize that we're always changing, healing, and growing. Yeah. Like we know that we need a partner that also is, interested in this, understands this. Yeah. So right, it's like, no, like especially for the man's perspective, like I kind of know what and who you're looking for. Yeah. And then be very selective. I guess with women too, like I kind of know and be very selective. Yeah. And this also helps us recognize like when we find ourselves in those unhealthy relationship dynamics of like saving, rescuing, fixing, while we ignore, neglect ourselves. Like, are we really looking for a lifelong partner to learn and practice love with? Or are we looking for someone to fix and caretake for? Yeah. Right? For us to create that familiar dynamic of like control and self-neglect. Whatever our patterns are, right? Whatever our patterns are. Yeah. Right? Like, and I think that this is the whole learning journey, is recognizing these patterns. Right? They'll keep repeating until like you said, right? We learned. And now we can move on. But it doesn't mean that you might sometimes you might fall back into it, but you recognize sooner. Yeah. And then you let it go sooner.
Kai, man, hell of a conversation that we had here today. Yeah. Thanks so much for coming on and talking to me.
Likewise, brother. Likewise.
For people who want to connect with you, what's the best place to do that?
Yeah, so to connect with me, my social media, Instagram and TikTok. Currently, I'm locked out of my main TikTok account. So you can find me on Instagram at Hello Dr. Kai. Doctor is spelt out, DOCTOR. And then on TikTok, it's Hi Coach Kai. Okay. So best way, and then you'll find my website on both of those social media channels. And I offer coaching, online community, courses, and free resources. So you'll find everything you need on my social media channels, and in my website, you'll find there.
And there will be links in the comment section below. Thanks so much for watching. I've got a free worksheet on how to stop overthinking. If you want to check that out, just click on my website below.